and I've got to obtain pleasures. My happiness is pleasure. My happiness is getting nice things, is having lots of money, is having £10,000 in the bank or £1 million in the bank, is having nice clothes, is having nice people around me. And all of that is an absolute lie. Well, the mind and that energy is focused on that, then what I'm talking about will always be covered, or seemingly covered. It wants to constantly focus on pleasure, 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 getting these pleasures. Me, 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 me. What I choose, what I choose, what I choose. So much importance on this choice, because the idea, the game that's played is I've got to choose pleasure. I've got to get to pleasure. And my life is terrible if I don't get pleasure, if I don't obtain these pleasures. And that's the lie. It's an absolute lie. Happiness, or the freedom that's looked for, is. It is. It's an absolute illusion, this game. It's a hide and seek. But it wants to keep focusing on that game, not for any particular reason, just because that's the mechanism of it. Just like the flower grows, and the flower grows towards the sun, so does that looking energy and that personal energy keep looking for better situations. It's so obvious that that's going to happen with complicated thinking. It's going to focus too much on environment and situation as being what creates happiness and rest. Of course that's what's going to happen if you think about it logically. As soon as there's an ability to think, it's going to think about environment, making this the best possible environment. And there's nothing wrong with that gentle movement towards more pleasurable things, but when that becomes the truth, that the situation is happiness, then it's endless suffering, because you're trying to grasp onto something that cannot be grasped, because all situations, everything is moving and changing. So every time you get it, you'll lose it. You get the beautiful flower, and then it begins to rot. Get the perfect partner, and then they find someone else. You have the moment of the pleasure, and then it's gone. You cannot hold anything. There is no thing. That's the trick of it. There is no thing. Everything's changing. If everything's changing, there's nothing. There's just oneness. If everything is constantly moving, there's no thing you can possibly grab onto. There is no separate things in that movement. There is no divide. And to that energy of looking, this sounds like craziness. If we were to go and sit and say this in a shopping mall, this would just sound like craziness. What do you mean? How could you say that my happiness, what I'm looking for, isn't in my situation? How can you say it's not in having a nice house? I mean, that seems like a logical thing with thinking. Can you say it's not in my environment, or not in my physical health, or the way my body behaves, whether it's a nice body or a horrible body, or a social body or an unsocial body? But then there's this other side that knows this beyond the thinking level, the aliveness of what is. The appearance of it, the appearances were always enough. What was happening was always enough. As a kid, this was so obvious. They're just playing, just watching. For no reason, no motive, nowhere to get to, just playing for hours, running through the fields, making up games. For no reason, nowhere to get to, no end goal, no in 10 years' time I'll have got there. It's just play. But this intellectual, kind of conceptual and energetical thing has become so strong. Me, my life, my world. Me, my life, my world. And all of it's on false ideas. The words that we've labelled things aren't actually things. There's not a reality behind the words, but we've taken them to be the absolute truth. This isn't really flower, this is just mystery. It's convenient that we can communicate. That's the way the human works, that communication can happen, but it's not a truth. It's so funny, isn't it? The humans looked and looked and looked and looked and built and grown and built, and it was never in that. It was always in what was happening. It's kind of a bittersweet game. In the education, in the lovers, in the money, in the big house, in the travelling the world, in the yoga, in the enlightenment. It's this.